what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, May 28th, 2021. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. End of the week, the Friday of the Memorial Day holiday, a 3-day weekend for some of us, not all of us. And we've got a lot to talk about today. And as usual, we're going to do news until we run out of news. And then we're going to open up the phone lines for your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. So let's get into it. All righty. I want to start off with election fraud because, as I said yesterday, to me, this is the main story happening in the country right now. And we need to keep the focus on it. You need to talk this up when you go to your little barbecues this weekend and you're, in between the beer and the hot dogs and everything. Just talk to other people and say, this last election really was a joke. And if we don't have honest elections, this country is really, really in trouble. So let's start off with the story coming on out of Domagood.com, where the audit in Maricopa is approaching 1 million ballots counted and inspected. The audit director says that the detractors are still trying to prevent them from completing the audit. They're trying every legal trick they can. They're interfering. They're stalling. They're calling names here. Story coming on out of Station Gossip. Over at MSNBC, Rachel Maddow and the Democrats are clearly showing signs of being frightened to death at this audit taking place. Rachel Maddow was out there saying that, there must be some way to stop this foolishness. No, that's not the way this country is supposed to operate. Remember, the burden of proof is on the government to demonstrate to the American people that the election by which they claim authority over us is fair and does represent the will of the majority of the legal voters in this country. And if they fail to do that, and obviously trying to stop the audits represents such a failure, then we're not obligated to listen to that government, to pay its bills, and certainly not to sacrifice our young people in these bloody wars of, I wouldn't say conquest, because they're not going all that well around the world. Over in Fulton County, their Board of Elections has gone to court trying to dismiss the election fraud case entirely as the forensic audit nears. Now, the judge, in order to listen to arguments, has postponed the start of the audit. It was supposed to start today, and the judge has basically said, well, it's going to push off into next week, but he's refusing to stop it outright. But again, the Democrats and, all these election officials who were part of the fraud, they're desperate. As every day goes further and more states start looking at this issue of election fraud, they are clearly becoming more and more afraid. Over in Wisconsin, their speaker, Robin Vos, has hired 3 retired police to look at the integrity of last November's election, but stopped short of ordering a forensic audit, even though a late-night ballot dump favoring Joe Biden has been documented and proven. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Up in Windham, New Hampshire. Now, earlier we were talking about how their auditors all turned out to be compromised, connected to Pelosi and Schumer, and now one of their 3 auditors has quit. And the law requires a team of 3 auditors. So right now, the audit in Windham, New Hampshire is frozen until they can get a new auditor in there. And again, they'll do anything to try and stop this from moving forward. Now, over in the United States Senate, a little bit of good news. No, actually, it's not good news, and I'll explain why. The Senate just defeated the bill to create a 9/11-style commission looking into the protest at January 6th, and a lot of people thought it was just going to be a usual witch hunt against Trump and his supporters. But, you know, it could have easily backflashed because of all the videos that have surfaced showing Capitol Police beckoning the protesters to come into the building. And so they didn't storm the building. They didn't break in. We know there were agent provocateurs among Antifa and Black Lives Matter who were causing all the damage. It was a setup to demonize Trump and his supporters. And I think they want to bury this commission because if they dig too much into what really happened on the 6th, it's not going to come out looking the way they want it to. Story coming on out of Domagood again. Hunter Biden has admitted on audio that he smoked crack with the mayor of Washington, D.C., Marion Barry, who was famous for being caught on video smoking crack. Then he went to jail, then he got out of jail, and he got reelected, which I would want to take a close look at that election as well. Now, I think this comes under the category of hoisting with your own petard. Down in Atlanta, there's this candidate for mayor who, as part of the legislature, voted to defund the police, and he had his Mercedes stolen right in broad daylight while he was standing there, literally by a group of children who piled on into the vehicle and simply drove it off. And everybody is laughing at him, and he's trying to basically defend it, saying, well, you know, no amount of police on the streets could have prevented this from happening. And so a little bit of delicious irony there. Meanwhile, over in Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot is being sued by a white reporter from the Daily Caller after she announced she would only give one-on-one interviews to black or brown journalists. And it's discriminatory on her part, and racism in any direction is wrong. And I'm glad that she is, in fact, being sued. Now, earlier in the week, there was a story about how Ghislaine Maxwell was going to start naming names ahead of her trial. And I said at the time that maybe she was trying to send a warning to people not to get involved in the trial against her. And now it turns out that many of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged co-conspirators, including recruiters, sexual partners, friends, are getting ready to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell and testify at her trial, which is coming up in September. All right. Meanwhile, another judge is allowing Alan Dershowitz's $300 million lawsuit against CNN to move forward. And I can imagine that CNN is getting very nervous. They're not in a good cash position. They're losing advertisers. They've lost 70% of their viewership just since the start of the year. And I don't think they have $300 million just sitting around in a cookie jar somewhere. So we'll see what happens on that. Getting into COVID down in Australia, they have imposed their fourth COVID lockdown on the city of Melbourne after a new cluster emerged. The lockdown began yesterday. It's set to remain in place for a week for Melbourne and the rest of the Victoria state after the new cluster of cases was uncovered of 26 new infections. And another 10,000 people have reportedly had some form of contact with those who are infected. Now, here is a very interesting story. This is coming out of Zero Hedge, and it's actually been picked up a couple of other places. There's a scientist in Germany, Rolf Marschalek. There it is, Rolf Marschalek. He's a professor at Goethe University in Frankfurt, and he has been studying just what it is that is causing the rare blood clots in some AstraZeneca vaccine recipients. And he said his research showed the problem was related to the adenovirus vectors that both the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine used to deliver the genetic instructions into the body, saying that this danger can be eliminated with a relatively easy tweak. So good for the professor, and hopefully AstraZeneca and J&J are going to go ahead and do that fix. It's going to mean destroying the existing stocks of their vaccines, But I'm sure with their commitment to the general public health, that they'll be ready to get rid of those vaccines the same way they were when thimerosal was outlawed. Anyway. Okay, now a lot of attention on that spike protein, and there has been a lot of talk about how this spike protein is capable of harming women's reproductive organs. And we know we've been hearing a lot of that out of Europe. But at the Western Medical Assessments, Dr. Roger Hodgkinson is saying this spike proteins can attack male fertility as well. So maybe the whole point of the COVID vaccines is population control, because we're not going to be able to have babies anymore unless you're part of the rich and elite and you have enough money to buy whatever it is it takes to undo the damage. So Dr. Hodgkinson is a pathologist who's been studying virology, infectious disease, and evidence-based medicine for many years. He was educated at the University of Cambridge and the University College Hospital Medical School in London before moving to Canada in 1970. Another story, and we talked about this earlier in the week, but the numbers have gone up. This is coming out of Crack News. There is a new FDA document that is admitting 86% of the children who participated in the Pfizer COVID vaccine trial experienced adverse reactions. Earlier in the week, they said it was 80%. The number has actually gone up a little bit. Okay. Over in Ohio, they have announced that following the institution of their $1 million vaccine lottery, vaccine compliance has increased by 33%. And that, of course, was the whole reason for this incentive and initiative. Again, these people they're taking a chance getting the shot that they're going to win $1 million, ignoring the fact that by taking the vaccine, they're taking a chance with their long-term health. Meanwhile, CVS Pharmacies has announced they're going to have a vaccine sweepstakes with cash prizes and more. So they're turning it into a gambling game. They really, really are. Now, there's been a lot of talk lately about employers mandating vaccines for their employees. OSHA originally came on out saying that employees who were harmed by vaccines mandated by their employers could sue the employers. Then they turned around and said, no, you can't do that. It turned out to be less of a problem than people were thinking, because there's a new survey out conducted by Fisher Phillips that said 83% of employers will not mandate COVID vaccines as a condition for employment. They said only 4% were committed to mandating vaccines. The rest remain undecided. Out in California, a little more good news there. Governor Newsom is no longer allowed to restrict houses of worship, and he's been ordered by a federal judge to pay a $1.35 million settlement to a Los Angeles area church in his capacity as governor because of the state's onerous lockdown rules against houses of worship. Now, this is going to come out of the California taxpayers' pocket and not Newsom's own, I'm sure. So, in addition to paying, Harvest Rock Church of Pasadena, U.S. District Court Judge Jesus G. Barnell also ruled that state restrictions on houses of worship would be permitted only if child infections rose 100% statewide. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. Here in Indiana, Governor Holcomb declared houses of worship as essential businesses. And I think that was right for him to do. And over at Claire's church, most of the people aren't even wearing masks anymore. Story coming on out of Global Research. It's a story of greed and money, which just seems inseparable from the medical industrial complex, and they're talking about this ongoing battle trying to suppress hydroxychloroquine as a cheap and effective treatment for COVID-19, because Big Pharma doesn't want a cure. They want ongoing vaccinations because they get a lot more money about that. And back on June 29th of last year, Dr. Anthony Fauci basically granted a green light to Gilead Sciences for a study of hydroxychloroquine, but the propaganda war has been basically stick with the vaccines, forget about natural immunity, forget about hydroxychloroquine, and there's even a new one that's showed up here. Story coming out of LifeSite News, Mexico City introduced a citywide initiative to give ivermectin to COVID-19 positive patients. And it's resulted in more than a 50% reduction in hospitalizations. So that is working just as well. Okay. As you're already aware, there's this Facebook insider who blew the whistle on Facebook's stifling of any posts expressing concern and caution about vaccines. The gentleman was suspended. Project Veritas has set up a GoFundMe for him to make up for his lost salary. Tucker Carlson had him on his show. The word is definitely getting on out there, and Republicans in Congress are now out there saying that this is a perfect example of why big tech cannot be the arbiter of truth, because they're describing Facebook as being arrogant for thinking it can decide where COVID comes from. And they're absolutely right about that. And that applies not just to Facebook, but to Twitter, and to YouTube, which kicked me off for expressing concerns about the vaccines. And so far, they seem to be rather unrepentant on that whole issue as well. The big question in my mind, and we need to find this out, have Facebook and Twitter and Google and all the rest of these big corporate social media outlets, are they acting as agents for the government? Because if they are, then Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act does not protect them. If they're acting as agents of the government, then the First Amendment right to freedom of speech applies to them as agents of the government, and the lawsuits can start flying. So we need to really document that these social media companies were, in fact, working under the direction of the United States government, and then we can start suing like crazy. Another article, this one out of UNS.com, stating the obvious, and we need to look at it, the ruling class and the elites, social media, whatever, were wrong about COVID-19, and it's now time to ask, what else have they been wrong about? Well, we remember that big whopper about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and they're focusing here on the collapse of this enforced narrative that COVID-19 could not possibly have come from a Chinese laboratory. And now even the corporate media is saying that's the most likely possibility, even as they're trying to bury the links between that Chinese laboratory and U.S. funding from the National Institutes of Health, and working together in concert with various American institutions, universities, and so forth and so on. Story coming on out of the National Pulse. The Senate has unanimously passed the Hawley bill to declassify all Wuhan lab intelligence. Now, this was written by Republican Senators Mike Braun and Josh Hawley, and the bill would give the Office of the Director of National Intelligence 90 days to declassify any and all information relating to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and COVID-19. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the story of how the Senate has unanimously passed the Hawley bill, which will force the Director of National Intelligence to declassify any and all information relating to the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origin of COVID-19. Now, the way it's worded, it almost sounds to me like this would exclude any information linking the Wuhan Institute of Virology with U.S. universities and institutions, keeping those hidden. So we already know the National Institutes of Health were funding this research in Wuhan, and we definitely need to keep that in the public eye. For the bill to actually materialize, it still has to pass the House of Representatives and be signed into law by His Fraudulency Joe Biden. So we'll see if that's actually going to happen. Meanwhile, over in the House China Task Force, one of their members is saying Fauci is either grossly incompetent or he's lying about the money going to the Wuhan lab, and Republicans continue to demand that Fauci be fired for his constant flip-flopping back and forth and basically just, acting like a dictator with the American people. Meanwhile, Beijing is doubling down on their claims that COVID actually originated in the United States of America and was then sent to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for additional work, from which it then leaked. And I can see where this is going propaganda-wise. They're going to blame China, reason to, hate China and do bad things to it, and sanctions and the rest of it. And the American involvement in what is now more and more appearing to be a botched bioweapon is going to get hushed up. Okay, a former State Department official in the Trump administration, who was part of that State Department probe that Biden just canceled, is saying it's ridiculous to say that COVID-19 came from animals, and their investigation found almost no evidence supporting the claim of a natural origin. So that's what they were finding over there. Given that it lines up with the propaganda, I kind of wonder why Biden shut that investigation down. But I guess he wanted one that he could guarantee control over. And that's why it's now been shifted to the intelligence agencies. Now, we had a caller call into the show about this yesterday. If this 9/11 style commission goes ahead on the COVID situation, Philip Zelikow is being appointed to chair this new investigation. And he was, of course, part of the 9/11 cover-up, his part of his group includes Event 201 participants, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. It's funded by Schmidt Futures. And there's all kinds of ties to globalists, and we should be very, very concerned. Another story, this one coming on out of cracknews.com, basically reminding us that left-wing media has already forgotten that they originally claimed the lab origin theory for COVID-19 was debunked. And they did, most of last year. And they were attacking anybody who suggested a lab origin for COVID-19 as tinfoil hat wearing wacko conspiracy theorists. And now they're flipping their story around and acting like that's what they've been doing all along, but we certainly know better. Another article, this one coming out of No More Fake News, and it's talking about research that was done up in Canada. And on April 2nd of this year, Health Canada issued an advisory that some of the face masks people were using contained graphene, which is a health hazard. And There was a Medium.com article by Andrew Maynard saying manufacturers have been using nanotechnology-derived graphene in face masks, leading to serious safety concerns because you inhale that stuff, it gets into your lungs. And since COVID-19 was supposedly attacking the lungs, the remedy that was being recommended turns out to cause what it is supposed to prevent. But of course, there was a lot of money to be made in face masks, and the face mask company made money, and those who own stock in the face mask companies made a lot of money, and now those face masks are they're out in the environment. They weren't being treated as bio waste to be disposed of properly. They just been dropped all over the place. I saw one in the parking lot at our local supermarket just the other day. All right, getting into other news here along COVID-19. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and over at the New York Slimes, they have a, you'll pardon the expression, science reporter, Apurva Mandavili, and she came out with a tweet saying that anybody suggesting that COVID-19 was leaked from the Wuhan lab was being racist, and that drew a tremendous backlash. She deleted the tweet, but not before Ted Cruz had basically laid into her, saying, this is not scientific, and, she's not willing to investigate anything that might hurt her little feelings, and he's definitely right about that. And it's another reminder that just because somebody works in the corporate media does not make them more knowledgeable or authoritative than anybody else. Usually they're there reading what they're told to write and saying what they're told to say, and that's the way modern media works. I remember back when I still lived on Oahu, and I was teaching a class in computer animation at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And just a couple of doors down from me, there was a class on the TV news. And what they were teaching in the class was how to do your hair and your own makeup. And there wasn't anything that I could detect about like real journalism or journalistic principles or ethics. They were just teaching these people how to be news readers. Anyway, getting on to the international news. This is from antiwar.com. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said yesterday he believes the Afghan military will be able to stand on its own against the Taliban after the U.S., NATO, and other coalition forces leave Afghanistan, which is a very long-winded way of saying we're getting out while we still can. Stoltenberg, by the way, today is over in the South China Sea on the deck of the HMS Queen Elizabeth, which is now out there conducting military exercises to annoy the Chinese. Over in Syria, not unexpectedly, Bashar al-Assad has won re-election by just a landslide. And, of course, you've got the U.S. and other governments saying, oh, it had to be rigged. Everybody hates Bashar al-Assad. Well, the West certainly does, but the Syrian people really seem to like him. And it's rather ironic to see our government out there saying that Syria's election had to be rigged and that Iran's upcoming election has to be rigged. But trust us, last November's election was squeaky clean, and you should stop looking at all the evidence of fraud there because you're just going to be helping the terrorists or some such nonsense there. Over in Israel and Palestine, things are still very tense there. Story out of antiwar.com. Despite massive losses, Palestinians have altered the course of history. And they're saying popular revolts are not the outcome of wishful thinking, but of circumstances, the tipping point of which can only be decided by the people themselves. And that's what happened in this case. Israel pushed a little too far. And the people revolted. We saw the same thing in Romania, where 2 weeks before it all came apart, you would have thought everything was just fine. And then Ceausescu wound up machine gunned on Romanian national TV. And I'm sure that our government is very concerned about pushing the American people past the breaking point, which is why they're out there trying to grab all the guns and shut down all internet discussion that's not in line with the official government story. So anyway, getting back to Israel and Palestine, May of this year, this month actually, was that tipping point. Palestinians rose up. This was leaderless resistance from Jerusalem to Gaza, every inch of occupied Palestine, including the refugee communities throughout the Middle East. And by doing so, they resolved an impossible political equation. The Palestinian problem was no longer that of Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem alone, but of Israeli racism and apartheid. Of course, Israel's out there saying that if you claim they are apartheid, you're just being an anti-Semitic Jew hater who wants Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens. That's what they always say. I mean, they scream anti-Semitism so much, it's almost like, who cares anymore? You're an anti-Semite. Yeah, who cares? Over at the United Nations, their Human Rights Council has ordered an unprecedented open-ended probe of Israel. And, of course, Netanyahu promptly responded by declaring this is a shameful decision. It's appalling. It's part of their anti-Israel obsession. It's anti-Semitic. And they want Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens again. So obviously Israel has something to hide, or they would not be having a panic about an investigation. Just like the Democrats, if they didn't have anything to hide about last November's elections, they wouldn't be in such a panic about the audits. A little bit of petty vindictiveness going on. Story out of alarabi.com. Israel is now stripping healthcare access for Palestinian activists in East Jerusalem. And they have been denied access to healthcare after Israeli authorities suspended their healthcare and state welfare provisions. Now, blocking healthcare is definitely part of Israel's multifaceted final solution to the Palestinians. It is a vicious and vile move, and it's also a war crime. Alrighty, Israel has arrested at least 250 Palestinian citizens in the last 2 days. Meanwhile, there was one Palestinian who was the victim of an attempted lynching. There have been no arrests made in that situation whatsoever. And there's the new normal there. Story coming on out of Middle East Eye. You know, Palestinians, they just want equality. And it's amazing to see so many people in this country screaming about how we're not equal and we've got to be equal and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And they turn around and say, well, the Palestinians shouldn't complain, you know, that Israel is right to basically take their homes and burn their crops and shoot their children. And Palestinians really are very unreasonable to be angry about that. But that's all the Palestinians want is equality. And in my opinion, the two-state solution is the only way to solve this. And it really does need to be brought about by somebody somewhere that has the gonadal tissue to make it happen. Okay. Meanwhile, the Palestinians, and especially the Gazans, are showing a tremendous resiliency. Of course, living the lives that they've lived under constant attack, it sort of would grow a very thick skin. But the Gazans are camping by the rubble of their homes. They're starting life up again. There were photos of a couple of birthday parties that were going forward despite the attacks. And it shows quite a bit of spirit and heart that I don't think we see on the antagonist side. Now, as I mentioned earlier, according to this article in Monda Weiss, It is now considered anti-Semitic to say that Israel practices apartheid. Well, big deal. Israel practices apartheid. Israel practices apartheid. Israel practices apartheid. Mahi dictum est. So, anyway. Mossad has a new leader, David Dedi Barnea. He's the new chief of the Mossad. And he's basically coming on in saying that we can expect fewer assassinations and a lot less noise from Mossad. Well, the fact that there are going to be fewer killings should make us be much more accepting of the killings that will happen. And the promise for less noise means they're going to try and keep the lid on what they're doing a little bit more carefully, because they've had some severe embarrassments recently. On the 28th of May, earlier today, university students across the United Kingdom staged a march all across the country to end the university system's complicity in Israeli apartheid. So that was a huge, huge march over there. Now, Israel may have militarily succeeded in Gaza, but politically they did not. Especially in the eyes of the world. And so possibly as a distraction from that, Israel is now threatening Lebanon with war. And, you know, like I said earlier, Netanyahu needs a credible enemy in order to keep the Israeli people afraid and under his control. And if it's not going to be Gaza, it's going to be Lebanon. If it's not going to be Lebanon, it's going to be Iran. This is one of the oldest tricks in the book, is manufacturing an enemy to keep your own population under control. Our government did it during the whole Cold War. Huge amounts of money spent on weapons, which thankfully were never used. Over in Kuwait, their National Assembly has strongly condemned the latest Israeli military aggression against Palestinians, and they are banning the normalization of ties with Israel. And that's going to be a major roadblock in the U.S. efforts to get Middle Eastern nations to normalize ties with Israel. A lot of countries have gone along with that. Obviously, Kuwait is not going to do that. Over in Iran, their foreign ministry spokesman, Saeed Khatibzadeh, says Washington and London are spinning the goals of the ongoing Vienna talks to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal in an effort to appease Israel, which is a sworn enemy of the agreement. Now remember, Israel was never part of the original Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They were never part of the process. They were never part of the agreement. Legally, technically, they've got nothing to say about it, and yet they are doing everything they can to prevent the return of that nuclear deal, again, because Netanyahu needs to have Iran to wave at the people of Israel to keep them afraid, to keep them under his control. So that's what's going on over there. Now, do you remember that when Donald Trump withdrew from the Open Skies Treaty last year, his detractors and the Democrats just attacked him? How dare you do that? Well, it turns out the Biden administration thinks that's perfectly fine, and they have informed Russia that the United States will not rejoin the Open Skies Treaty. Now, for those of you wondering what that's all about, the Open Skies Treaty says that all the signers of the treaty have the right to overfly each other's countries to keep an eye on their military development, especially with regards to nuclear weapons. And Trump pulled out of that deal. The Democrats trashed him for it, but now that Democrats are in control of the White House, they think it's a really good idea. Down in Mexico, there was this election candidate, and Alma Barragan, and she went on Facebook to ask locals to join her rally, and shortly afterwards she was gunned down. So A lot of wet work there. Well, we're going to hit a point where we're going to start seeing that stuff happening here in the United States. All right, let's talk about the economic news now. There's a lot going on. We're getting in, obviously, the Memorial Day weekend. It's a huge travel weekend. People are out there in their cars. Traffic is volume of traffic is up something like 60% over this day last year because of the COVID vaccine. Gas prices have hit a 7-year high, and Russia and the Middle East are making a fortune. While Americans are facing misery at the pump, and Trump is reminding everybody what gas prices were like when he was the president. And it's a valid point here. Biden, as you are probably already aware, is proposing a $6 trillion with a T dollar budget for 2022. Pushing federal spending to the highest level since World War II. Now, the budget, in order to work, is assuming there will be a massive retroactive capital gains tax. And Biden wants to hike the top rate on capital gains to 43.4% from the current 23.8% for households with income over $1 million. Now, for those of us who have never seen $1 million, you might say, well, you know, let's let the rich pay their fair share. But this is going to drive more millionaires to leave the country. The really dangerous part is he wants to make the increase retroactive and force capital gains realization at death as well. In other words, when you die, your property is taxed again. And as far as this retroactive part is concerned, doesn't that violate the ex post facto provision of the United States Constitution? And as far as taxing people, you know, there's already death taxes. You know, when you die, you don't get off the hook for taxes. They come in and they take a whole bunch of other stuff, and now Biden wants to grab a little bit more. Little bit of good news. The 6th U.S. Court of Appeals has slapped down Biden over his prioritizing COVID-19 relief based on race or sex of the business owners. Now, there was a lawsuit, Vitolo versus Guzman, and it basically said there was this white guy who needed help with his business. He was turned down because he was white. That's racist. And the judges agreed, saying it's still discrimination, and Biden cannot do that. Turning to immigration here, story out of Station Gossip. There is this Trump West Point Advisory Board appointees, a decorated Army veteran, is out there saying that Biden appears to be trying to make white people the minority in the United States by replacing Americans with all of these migrants and refugees. And by the way, whites are now the minority business owners in this country. We'll be right back after these words. Welcome back to our show. Here we're talking about immigration, and over at the Department of Homeland Security, they are looking at deleting questions about gang affiliation from the application migrants file to get the green cards. And basically this is going to mean that dangerous criminals will have an easier time getting through the process. So that strikes me as a really dumb idea. So anyway, meanwhile, it turns out that along with all of the other illegals rushing across the Rio Grande, they're starting to see Romanian gypsies that are coming on in. And U.S. Border Patrol officers were trying to talk to them in Spanish. And got no response, and finally one of them explained in broken English that they were Romanian gypsies. So talking about criminal element coming into the country here. Getting into political correctness and woke type stuff. Over in Montana, their attorney general has issued a ruling. It's limited to Montana. but it may set a precedent for other states, basically saying that many of the aspects of critical race theory and anti-racism training are in fact unlawful. The ruling addresses many common tactics in training, including segregating people by race, race shaming, ascribing certain attributes to people based on race. We've all heard that one. If you're white, you're racist. So it was a 25-page opinion. And I think it's going to have an impact on other states looking at this whole critical race theory training. Over at USA Today, oh my goodness, they had an article, and the article was written by Abigail Schreier, author of Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, and included comments about male athletes claiming to be female and competing in women's sports. And USA Today basically edited out what they called hurtful language, which was most of the comments about these biological males competing in women's sports. So they're being blasted for caving in to the woke culture on that one. You're going to love this one. Over at the University of Arkansas, the school spent a total of $11,050 for a virtual drag show. The event was hosted by the school's university programs. It featured 6 local drag queens, and apparently only 38 people actually tuned into it. So that's a little bit of an embarrassment there. Over in Virginia, an elementary school physical education teacher has been placed on leave for saying that a biological boy cannot be turned into a biological girl and vice versa. Okay, there's the music. We've got to take a station identification. Let's open up the phone lines, 512-248-8252. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252. And we're going to go to Jim in New York. Hello, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jim, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing Jim in New York. Jim, are you there? All right, well, I'll tell you what. We're going to go to Bruce in Texas, and we'll come back to Jim if he shows up again. So, Bruce, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Yeah, Bruce?
Hello, Mike.
Okay, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Okay, we seem to be having a problem with our phone system today. And I'm assuming that this is Bruce in Texas. Bruce, can you not hear me?
No, I don't think he can't hear you.
Okay, well, let's try Tom in Florida. Tom, can you hear me? Are you there, Tom?
No, hang on. They're not going to be able to hear you.
Okay, we are, in fact, having some problems with the phones. All right, so I'm going to go back to some news here. We have been talking about Biden's nominee to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Boy, that must be a fun place to work. They got all the fun stuff over there. And Chuck Grassley said that confirming this nominee, Chipman, is like putting Antifa in charge of the Portland Police Department, and it does seem like that would be a counterproductive situation. It snowed yesterday morning in Minnesota. They're actually expecting more snow in the northern Great Plains and out west from this weather system that's crossing the country right now. Gosh darn, that human-caused global warming. All right, we're going to try the phone system now. Jim in New York, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Good, good. Thank you for fixing things, Mike. And what's on your mind, Jim?
I was interested in, I think it's going to be entertaining watching Caitlyn Jenner run for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think most of the Republican establishment will support her or him. I should say.
Yes.
And they'll say, well, you can't let Newsom win.
No, Newsom is gone. I mean, the dog catcher could beat Newsom. Claire could beat Newsom. She'd get my vote.
Yeah, well, I think Caitlyn Jenner has a real chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be interesting watching these fake evangelical Christians like Mike Pence and others. Boy, it's really going to put them on the spot.
Yes, it is.
They think of this, a transgender. My guess is they'll just keep silent, and they won't say a word. And as I said a couple weeks ago, be very careful what kind of Republicans you vote for.
Mm-hmm.
I still think the Republicans are going to win the Senate and the House in 22 because they have to keep the illusion that we have a choice. And you can't.
Well, that illusion has been pretty badly damaged last November, and I don't think they're going to convince the American people that we have honest elections, anytime in the future, unless they back off and allow a full audit of what happened last November and move to definitely correct the problems that allowed that massive fraud to take place.
Yeah. Well, as I said months ago, it's not the first presidential election that was stolen.
No, election fraud has a long history in this country. I mean, John F. Kennedy stole it from Richard Nixon with the help of organized crime. And, but that doesn't mean that we should sit here and say this is acceptable because, no, it isn't. Now, fortunately for the country, Kennedy turned out to be a good president. But obviously, Joe Biden has turned the White House into the world's most expensive nursing home.
But no, I think the Republicans will win 22. Not that it matters, because as long as you have these rhinos like Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney,
mm-hmm.
Rubio, Liz Cheney, and others in these positions, it won't make a difference. And you know what? They'll fix the elections for those type of rhinos.
Okay.
I've heard in Arizona, nobody liked John McCain, and yet every time he was up, he would get reelected.
I got a lot of emails and even phone calls from Arizona saying this has to be election fraud because nobody I know voted for him.
Right, so they'll fix it for key rhino Republicans. Lindsey Graham, another one, he'll win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they also fix it for these neocons to win because, again, you want the illusion that your vote matters. And so, no, I think Republicans will win in 22. I really do. And once they get, what will they do? Well, they'll cut taxes for billionaires. They'll do more defense spending, and they get mad. I went to that site Zero Hedge. It's kind of like a pro-business type Republican site.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who they had these articles like? You know who they're mad at? They're mad at people who are unemployed and getting an extra $300 a week. That's who they direct their anger at. That's who these Republican establishment types hate. Some schmo who got laid off making $30 an hour,
mm-hmm.
and he's on unemployment. They're mad at him for not taking a job for $12 an hour. That's what they're mad at. That's who they directing their anger at. Some schmo. And not the trillions that went to the defense contractors and the bankers. And you know what? When the Republicans get in again, it's what they'll win on. They'll win on cutting that extra $300 for some schmo. So that's again, you get the worst of both parties. And
True.
the Republican establishment, the only thing they win on is tax cuts for billionaires, neocon wars, and more defense spending. So, anyway, you have a great weekend, and thank you very much for taking my call.
You got it. Thank you for the call, and we're going to go over to Bruce in Texas. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Super. You know, I have a sister. She's in her 70s. And my brother is going to take her to get the vaccine, despite my already telling them, you know, maybe it's not worth the risk.
Yes.
And I've been trying to figure this out, you know. Why do people, because the doctor recommended it. I think it's the psychology behind it is it's the removal of responsibility, personal responsibility.
Yes.
Someone else told me to do it. He's an authority figure. The TV, the person on the anchor, the news reader, the propagandist, the marketing, you know, it all combines to move people to just blindly do whatever the hell they tell you to do.
Yeah, that's the goal of propaganda.
And they've done a heck of a job on it. And it's just depressing. I don't know what to do about it. I guess I can't do anything. Just cross my fingers, you know.
Well, you can speak out and just say to everybody, you know, we're the most lied to people on the face of the earth. You know, we even had George Bush, admitting to the use of propaganda to sell the wars. And, now the good news is that polls are showing public trust in the government and the corporate media and even the medical establishment is in rapid decline right now. And that's the reason they're doing all this stuff with lotteries and lottery tickets and, other prizes to get people to take those vaccines. Because the vaccine hesitancy represents a loss of confidence in the orthodox medical world.
Yeah. I went to the hospital myself, the VA hospital, and the doctor, the nurse asked me, did you want the vaccine? No, I'm fine without it. I'm okay for now. I already had it.
Yeah.
I already had COVID. So, and then this doctor, and he was a young doctor, I'll say in his 20s, and he was bragging to me about his stature as an instructor or what have you in his department. He stopped his son. So that was kind of weird off the bat. And he told me, okay, are you ready to take the vaccine? And so I said no. And it went back and forth for about 10 minutes. And I could see he was visibly getting angry. And I wasn't raising my voice with him. I was just making factual arguments against it. And so I went and requested another doctor, and it's just a control issue with some people, I believe,
Yeah.
It's a position of authority. And,
well, it's not just a control issue. It's an article of faith. I remember when Claire and I were back on Oahu, we made friends with this lady, and we stayed with her, supporting her through a personal tragedy in her life. But she was a nurse, and, when we talked to her about our concerns, even back then, about vaccines, I mean, she got so upset. How dare you even begin to question? And that was actually the beginning of the end of our friendship.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thanks for taking my call. And you have a good weekend. Enjoy your Memorial Day.
All right. Well, same to you. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to go to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you. Yeah, Mike, good day to you. And very good call by Jim in New York. Very good call. And, happy Memorial Day to all your listeners and you and Claire and all your family and everybody. So have a great Memorial Day weekend. Mike, here's what I want to get to. Let's get to the real facts of the news now. This guy, Barrena, the illegal Mexican from Mexico, has been found guilty of the murder of Molly Tibbetts today.
Yes.
Okay? the medical examiner said one of the wounds went right through her hand. The knife wound went right through her hand. I guess he almost cut her fingers off when he stabbing her to death.
Well, it's a defensive wound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the medical report is that she basically had 13 major wounds into her body. Okay, that would have been dead shots. But this guy now is claiming that the boyfriend had something to do with it, which the jury said no, you murdered her. You're the one that said you blacked out. They found the blood in his trunk. He put her in the cornfield and dumped the corn stalks on top of her.
Yes.
So this guy's just now been found guilty of murder of an American citizen, an illegal alien. You got this bumbling buffoon telling our government not to worry about these illegals that are coming in or in gangs over in Central America to give them green cards so they can get jobs. You also got this bumbling buffoon hasn't said a damn word about the angel mothers and fathers who's had a loved one murdered, which is almost 6,000 in the last 10 years, Americans murdered by illegal aliens, the angel mothers and fathers. This bumbling buffoon, these demon rats, never said a damn word about none of those families, Mike. Okay?
Yes.
Now, Joe Biden's daughter got murdered and raped by an illegal alien. What do you think the media would be doing right now? They would shut that border down so fast, it would make your head swim.
Yes.
Okay? If Joe Biden's daughter or one of his grandkids got murdered by an illegal alien with a DUI or something, drunk, wrecking into their car illegally here, the media would, oh my goodness, or Kamala Harris's family. Can you imagine? In the meantime, they're flooding our country with millions. They're going to have millions of more illegals.
Yes.
California, like I told you, has got close to 9 million. It ain't going to end with these demon rats. They want to vote the sheer vote, to wipe out the white Northern European and Caucasian Americans. Now, Mike, let's get to another story that we haven't heard a damn word about. You've been talking about it. Last year, you were talking about it quite a bit. Jesse Smollett.
Yes.
What's going on with the Smollett case, Mike? You have any recollection what may be going on?
Have not heard anything lately.
No. But if that would have been a white guy perpetrating that against, and all we heard about Derek Chauvin this, and Pink Floyd, we haven't heard a damn thing about Smollett trying to start an absolute race war.
Yeah.
They did that with Chauvin.
Anytime there's a hate crime hoax, it's immediately dropped off the corporate media. I mean, we had that one just the other day where a black-owned business was vandalized and painted with KKK and other stuff, and the security cameras showed it was two black guys who were doing it, and it was reported once, and it's gone. It's completely off the news inventory now.
Well, absolutely, Mike. And, the Jews are famous for doing that with their synagogues, where they swastikas on their synagogues and blame it on Germans, Aryan boys, when it's a bunch of Jews doing it. That's happening all over the United States of America.
We had that situation out at Claremont College where this professor was claiming that her car was vandalized with anti-Semitic graffiti. Turned out she'd done it herself. Another one at Georgetown University was complaining about anti-Semitic graffiti being drawn on her dorm wall, and the school put up a security camera without telling her, and it caught her, doing the graffiti herself on her own dorm room door. But these stories are never given any corporate media coverage because they don't want the American people understanding that a lot of these so-called hate crimes are, in fact, hoaxes. I mean, you think back to the Tawana Brawley hate crime hoax, and that one actually destroyed careers before it came on out that it was all a fake.
What about the Duke University, Mike?
There's a Duke, that's another good example.
And look at here, we're here in South Florida 5 years ago. It was on NBC News, on the local news, that a Jewish guy got caught trying to put, they caught him, literally caught him, putting the swastikas and all this stuff on these Jewish temples here in South Florida. But that never made major news, but it was here in the local news that the guy who happened to be Jewish. Unbelievable what these log agents are getting away with. But
it's unbelievable what the corporate media is getting away with because, they're trying to convince us all that these hate crimes are real in order to use them to politically motivate us. And they don't want the American people understanding that a large number of these so-called hate crimes are, in fact, fakes.
Now, Mike, let's get back to this.
Yeah.
The Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris,
yes,
was saying the whites that did that to Jesse Smollett when he was on that show Empire, that was Kamala Harris at the time, and she's married to a Jewish man, okay, yes. Camilla. She was saying, how dare the whites attack poor Jesse Smollett in Chicago? She's the Vice President of the United States right now, okay, with her filth that she was perpetrating on the major networks when that case was going down with Jesse Smollett. Now look at it. She accused Joe Biden of being a racist. In the debate, the first debate they had her in South Florida, FIU,
yep.
I mean the University of Miami, she's calling Joe Biden a racist, and now she's on the ticket. Now she's a vice president, a heartbeat away from the presidency, which she'll probably be president within a year, like I told you.
Yes.
She's the one that accused Biden of being a Klansman, basically, and he's a racist. You got this bumbling buffoon Biden bringing all these thousands of gang members in here in the United States of America. Where is the media on that? Where, like Kathy, the lady called from Hot Springs, where is a million-man march in Washington to stop this? Where is the million-man march, Mike, to stop our... It would only take 50,000 men and women to say enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate this illegal incursion into our country, the invasion of our country. If 50,000 men were to go in that Capitol and do peacefully and hold signs and bullhorns and hand out flyers, tell everybody they can, and I mean, if they have to go around the whole city of Washington, D.C., handing out flyers, bullhorns, that we're being invaded, whatever it takes. Maybe you'll end up with 10 million. Maybe you'll end up with 20 million. But that's what it's going to take, Mike. You want to do this peacefully?
Well, looking at the demographics of the population of Washington, D.C., I think it's far more effective to just go out into the American heartland and start handing your pamphlets out to them and sort of build a grassroots coalition that will then be the 50,000 people to march into Washington, D.C. You're not going to get Washington, D.C. To march on itself. They're all there working for the government, and they're on government handouts, and they're perfectly happy the way things are.
I agree with that, Michael, 100%. You are 100% about what you said about Washington. It is 90% black. Why do you think they want to turn the District of Columbia into another 2 senators? Why do you think they want to turn that into a state?
Anyway, Tom.
That's correct.
Tom, got to let you go. Yes. Sorry about that. Phone lines are open, 512-248-8252. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and again, a friendly reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network needs your continuing support so that we may go on informing the American people so that they can make good choices. And once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. Now remember, if you mail in a donation of $100, you will get your choice of an official RBN coffee mug or an official RBN t-shirt. So please include a return address, and if you want the t-shirt, your t-shirt size. If you send in $115, that's 115, you will get both items. And don't forget the front sight firearms deal. That is a real sweet deal for Second Amendment enthusiasts. All righty, we have phone lines open right now, 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Marco in Alabama. Hello, Marco. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael. First and foremost, hey, Tom in Florida. Did you see, dude, that the Biden administration is lifting gang status, dude, when they approach for a green card? Move. All those MS-13 people, dude, that are going to be coming through the border.
Yep.
Couple observations for today, man. A caller called in response to the Mike Adams article, in yesterday's podcast. He's not taking in consideration of the fact from the 15,000-foot perspective, dude, that originally when Trump, dude, brought through Operation Warp Speed, the liberals, dude, defied it. They were like, don't take it. It's too early, dude. There's poisons and all that stuff, dude. They had the far right, approach to it originally. I think, dude, that we need to encourage liberals to take the vaccine. Play along with the lottery. Because if you look at it from the 15,000-foot perspective, that podcast was sitting there saying that if you are dumb enough to take a vaccine for a Krispy Kreme donut, if you are dumb enough to take the vaccine for a lottery ticket, dude, that's essentially worth, dude, maybe $1, if you don't have the right to be a part of the future going forward, you are not going to be a part of the new American solution. And that's what this is. Do not take the vaccine. None of you. I'm sorry, Michael, that you had taken it.
I'm sorry I took it as well, but we were kind of put in a position where we were not going to be allowed to see Claire's mother unless I did.
I mean, I am facing, like I just recently quit my job because they were pushing the vaccine things. And I luckily found an employer who is from India and who is sympathetic, dude, to what's going on. And he's an anti-vaxxer. And I just got a job with him. I mean, I left my job in a heartbeat. I didn't even give them 2 weeks notice because if they're going to sit there and push this on you, I mean, you people have to realize and look at this vaccine like this. If these people come to you and try to force you to take this vaccine, this is like somebody coming to assault you or try to kill you because you know that there's the SM-102, the hydrochloric acid, dude, in these vaccines, and they're not for human consumption. So if they're trying to come at you to sit here and take one of these vaccines, dude, they're trying to kill you. And you need to defend yourself accordingly. I'm sorry, the future is for the smart. We have the robots on our heels. We are going to be working next to robots. The RoboCop future is now. It's on the cusp of being brought out. What everybody fails to realize about COVID-19 is that this was pushed on us, a biological weapon, because probably since even before the Clinton administration, they've been mismanaging, the budgets and the government and all that stuff. They need people dead, dude, so that they could get more money. I mean, this is where we're at today, people.
Well, they're definitely talking about, depopulation is, they've been talking about depopulation for a long time. And if you remember earlier in the show, we were talking about how the spike protein appears to have serious negative consequences for both male and female reproduction.
I mean, when these liberals, go to Whole Foods and all of that stuff and sit here and spend, $500, dude, and don't even fill their grocery basket, dude, and they want to eat all non-GMO. They are GMO. These people are GMO now. You can't.
Well, yeah, Whole Foods isn't what it used to be since it got acquired.
It's crazy.
You gotta read those labels because Whole Foods is not what it used to be. They're trading on the name and the reputation, but a lot of what they're selling is no different than what you'd get at your local corner supermarket. That's the way things work here in the United States.
Because on your call screener it says vaccine tourism. You guys, there is Taiwan, Japan, Vietnam are all coming to America, dude, to get vaccinated. Look this up, you guys. Vaccine tourism, dude, is another undercover disguise to bring more illegal immigrants into this country.
All right. Well, Marco, thank you very much for the phone call. We got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We've got other callers waiting on the lines, 512-248-8252, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We have open phone lines now, 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Biden has done it again. He talks a big game about wanting to go green and pushing various technologies, which require access to rare earth elements in particular.
Yes.
So in January, he made a big pitch for making sure that we had our own rare earth element mining and production in line. Yesterday, day before yesterday, he announced, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to get all of our rare earth elements from Canada, Brazil, and some other such place because we want to import them into the United States and to do all the processing here.
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting on top of several massive rare earth deposits in the United States. I'm I'm in line to consult for one out in Hudspeth County, Texas, on their water supply issue. It's a big one out there. The Around Top project. It's north of Sierra Blanca. They've worked on that thing for years to get it online, and now this idiot comes along and says no rare earth production in the United States, none. Now that means if we can't get that production from Canada or from Brazil, if something disrupts that part of the supply line, where do you go for it? If you're not going to allow production in the United States, you have to go to China or some other country. And so this seems to me to be just another example of Biden's inability to stick with something I read from a couple of sources that the reason he did that was that he wanted to avoid a fight with the environmentalists in the United States. For no other reason than the fact that I don't have the backbone to fight the Sierra Club or Earth First or some other loony left-wing environmental group. Now, there are a lot of Americans who could be gainfully employed in the mining and processing of these minerals in the United States.
Yes.
But Biden's too beholden to the left wing, extreme left wing of his party to understand that. That's the same reason he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yes.
He didn't want to fight with the environmentalists. He has no backbone, absolutely no backbone, and no vision. He doesn't understand that you can't just move a mineral deposit somewhere else because you don't like where it is. You have to develop it where it is. And mining technology over the years has developed to such an extent that the impact of mining is not nearly what it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 30 years ago. But he doesn't care. This was all politically driven. He has no backbone, period, and no understanding of where minerals and fuels come from. He is a disaster, an absolute disaster. I look at that mining project in Hudspeth County. I was out there just a couple of weeks ago. I'll be out there again for 10 days, beginning the 6th of June. It's a big prospect, a huge prospect.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he wants it to sit there undeveloped because he doesn't want to get into a fight with AOC and others who think that we can get all this elsewhere. It's just disgusting what's happening. He is just a feckless, weak old man, and I'm afraid that he's just going to rip this country. He's ripping it apart right now.
Well, it's not like he's deliberately ripping it apart, that the country's ripping itself apart because of this whole liberal agenda, and Biden is not strong enough to hold it together. Now, Trump, for all of his other failings, he was able to sort of stop the deterioration of our country, at least for his time in office.
Well, I'd say at least Trump had a backbone. And Trump understands economics. Biden does not understand economics. You can look at his proposed $6 trillion budget that he's going to drop tomorrow. Does anybody who has any elementary grasp, much as elementary grasp of economics, understand the absolute damage that's going to do to the economy of this country? We're going to end up looking like Argentina in the 1980s.
Yes.
The Weimar Republic in the 1920s.
We're definitely headed that way.
Runaway inflation. Yeah. And the only people who are going to come out of this alive and happy are the very wealthy who can take their assets and move them around to things that are going to appreciate substantially. Whereas those of us who worked hard and put away a couple of $1 million to retire are going to get screwed. And it's going to be even worse for people who don't have even that much. They're going to get screwed. Man, that's the makings of a revolution right there. If they think,
sadly, I'm afraid you're right.
Yeah, if they think people are just going to allow them to take from them by jacking around with the economy of this country like that, they're wrong. This is just infuriating. Anyway, I don't know whether you heard about his decision regarding rare earths. And frankly, I'm not sure if he can get away with that. Private property. People can develop resources on their own private property.
Well, he could always declare a national monument. I mean, Clinton did that up in Utah. The Grand Staircase Escalante Monument was declared over this gigantic deposit of low sulfur coal, and it forced users of coal to have to buy coal from foreign sources that were financially tangled up with the Clintons. It also violated Utah's statehood agreement because Utah was supposed to be funding their schools with the revenue from those coal mines. But Clinton declared a national monument, and that was the end of that.
Well, I think the reason they were able to get away with that is that in in many western states, the federal government owns a lot of land,
they're not supposed to own any more land than that which is underneath federal buildings and federal infrastructure like harbors and airports. They're not supposed to own any other land. I think it's called the Enclave Clause.
Right, I know that, and you know that, but the average person doesn't know that, and as a result of it, the federal government has laid claim to billions of acres in the American West.
Yeah, and it's pledging it as collateral on government borrowing from foreign governments. And that is a really dangerous situation because we're coming up on a time when we're going to have representatives of these foreign countries show up and say, hey, the government defaulted on the loan and the land your home is sitting on was pledged as collateral. So, get on out. We've got some settlers ready to move in.
Well, they can't get away with that in Texas. There's no federal land in Texas other than the national parks.
Yes.
Oh, there's that, and those people hold complete title to the property in Texas. The federal government cannot come in and just claim it. There would be absolute chaos, revolution in the state of Texas if they tried that.
I can imagine so.
It's a private company developing it mine, and they own it. They can develop it without interference from the government, and they can sell those products, those processed ores, to whomever wants to buy them. So Biden can take that and shove it up his rear end. Good Lord, I can't believe this. Mike, thanks for letting me rant. I appreciate it.
All right, you've got it. Thank you for the phone call. We have lines open right now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. That was a good call.
Yes, it was.
One thing, though, is when referring to mining, usually you're mining something for another reason, right? And instead of like Heath said, is send it on over to China. No, make it there. It's actually more environmentally friendly, local economies that way, than by outsourcing anything at all. Because there's so much added energy involved in that. So, anyway, I called about vaccination hesitancy, and I sent you an email. I don't know whether you've talked about this guy yet, or at all.
Okay.
This French virologist, and he's an actual Nobel Prize winner, and he's saying that these quote-unquote variants, which are mutations, are actually caused by these shots.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. This is very important. This guy isn't an idiot. He's this guy's right up there with people like Harry Mullis, who invented the PCR test, who coincidentally died, in August of 2019.
Yes.
These pharmaceutical companies, the people that are employed there, they're not stupid, and the people that are running them aren't stupid. What they're doing is they're setting themselves up for life. And, these jabs are like $35, $40, next year maybe 50 or 60. But they know if someone takes one once, they're going to take it again.
Yes.
It's an update, right, because of these variants. So, they might as well have done something like this for the common cold. Because it's more or less the same thing.
Well, they may be doing it for the flu. I mean, every year there's a new variant of the flu out, and therefore you have to get a new flu shot. Just, the money keeps pouring in.
Yep, and the same people do it. It's always the same people. Very rarely will someone just go in and get a flu shot for the hell of it and then not do it the next year. I mean, that's almost unheard of.
Yes.
And where I work, a third of the people got these these shots. Moderna and AstraZeneca. I think one person got the Pfizer thing, and I asked them a bunch of questions even before they did it. They had no idea, Mike. You know what I mean? So they just blindly go into this without even knowing anything. And I said, have you ever heard of something called informed consent?
Yes.
You're consenting to be experimented on, but you're not informed. You're just scared. And it's working. Like, what they're doing to people like you is actually working. And, you know, after being on them for a few days now, and they've already gotten all of them gotten the shots.
Yes.
So, you know, this was about a week and a half going by, and then I brought up this stuff here. I started in on this stuff yesterday with this virologist from France.
Yes, I'm looking at your email right now.
To open their eyes. Yeah, now they're really starting to open their eyes. And I said, see what you've done to yourself? You had no idea going in, and you refused to be informed. You called me a conspiracy kook. Now look at this. I said, I've been a conspiracy kook my whole life, and I've always been right.
Yes.
You know, I remember, like, just the day 9/11. Some of these people actually think that happened as the government would love us to believe. But even that day when it happened, no one believed that those buildings fell like that.
Especially Building 7.
Being hit by planes. Yeah. No one believed that on that day. And then, you know, people, you tell a big lie that's big enough, and you tell it long enough, and sooner or later people will start to believe it.
Well, that doesn't work anymore.
Well, it works on a lot of people still, Mike.
Now, less and less. Less and less. I mean, if the big lie still worked, CNN would not have lost 70% of their audience this year.
Well, Mike, CNN has been around for what, like 35 years now or something? And right from the start, it was just nonsense. I mean, like, how much news was out there back then? You know what I mean? I mean, even now. So it was always nonsense. If people didn't, what am I saying? If people didn't know, of course they didn't know, Mike, because some people are just more gullible than others.
Mm-hmm.
And who's still watching CNN? I don't know what their viewership is, but I heard it fell like 80% in the last year and a half or something.
Yes.
So who are even watching that or listening to it? I mean, I can't watch it because I don't have programming. I mean, I guess I can get it on YouTube or something, but I mean, so what's their viewership? 1 million people?
I really don't know, but I know it's not very good. And even Fox News is in decline. One American News Network, though, their viewership is growing. The listenership of Republic Broadcasting is growing. The readership at whatreallyhappened.com is growing. And so there's definitely this seismic shift, if you will. You know,
well, I tell a lot of people about your site.
Yeah.
They always ask me, well, how do you know this stuff? Where do you get your news? And I said, well, I don't go to propaganda sites like the CBC. You know, come on, please. Like, this is, who pays for that? The taxpayers. So they're using your cash against you. I said, go to this place here. This is where you want to go. And,
yeah.
And the thing is, with your site and the links that are there are more than one place that's actually reporting on these things. Like, for instance, this one right here, like the one I sent you. I don't think that link had anything to do with your website, but another link did, and it's the same. They're reporting the same thing, right? I just pulled that off a search engine, right? So
yes.
You know, but I know I got this originally off of your website somehow. So I mean, this was already there. But, you know, it's very important. People, it's a shame. You know what's a shame, Mike, is that you couldn't get, you know, airtime on regular TV. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because these people that watch these stupid boxes, these program boxes, and they buy newspapers. I don't know. Well, actually, yeah, if you get delivered here still. They don't even know what the hell they're reading. They think it's real and it's not. You know, it's too bad. Anyway, that's my rant, Mike, and I appreciate your time. You have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And I'm just putting up a story about Fauci back in 2012 was talking about gain-of-function research in bat viruses was worth the risk of a pandemic. Okay, we have completely open phone lines right now. We're coming up on our last commercial break and our last segment. As you're already aware, earlier this week we had a lunar eclipse. across much of the United States. And on June 10th, there will be a Ring of Fire annular solar eclipse also visible across North America. The path of the eclipse starts at sunrise in Ontario, Canada, and it's going to be heading mostly in the northern latitudes. And the continental United States is kind of going to miss out. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with our last segment after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and it is becoming very obvious that China is definitely leapfrogging ahead of the United States in various areas of science and technology. And they are apparently making great strides with nuclear fusion, and it just set a new world record for the longest duration in time sustaining sun-like temperatures needed for fusion to occur. Now, they're still a long way away from seeing this as a viable power plant, but they set a new record for how much time that they kept this fusion going. Meanwhile, up on Mars, the Chinese rover is finally roving. They got it off the top of the landing platform, and it is starting to tool around and take a lot of pictures and do a lot of science. And of course, that's joining the Perseverance rover and its little helicopter Ingenuity, which had a little bit of a whoopsie. They flew it Saturday, and part of its navigation system suffered a malfunction, but they did get the Ingenuity helicopter down safely, and they're working on fixing the problem on that one. Meanwhile, the European Space Agency is planning to build a sat-nav and telecommunications satellite network around the moon to make it easier for future explorers on the moon to communicate with each other, to communicate with the Earth. As you're already aware, China has a rover on the far side of the moon that has to communicate with a Chinese orbiter to reach Earth. This satellite network would probably, eliminate that need. And my guess is that the next step after that will be put a similar network around the planet Mars to speed up navigation and communications there as well. Russia has debuted the world's first electric motor plane. It's going to be demonstrated at the MAX International Air and Space Salon, taking place July 20th through the 25th. Now, the airframe is a standard Yak-40 aircraft, but in the nose, they have this advanced electric motor and propeller, and they're going to be demonstrating that as well. So that's going to make all the environmentalists happy about that. Meanwhile, down in the Congo, they've had Mount Nyiragongo is erupting. It's flooding lava all over the place. The nearby Lake Kivu is on fire. And we're also seeing an increase in volcanic activity at Mount Etna. This is in addition to the one that just blew in Alaska. So we've got the planet Earth is rocking and rolling and really getting its rocks off, as it were. Last story, over in Kenya, 2 young inventors have built a bio-robotic prosthetic arm that operates off of brain waves, brain signals. And there was this video of this guy wearing the test arm, literally taking a drink of water from the robotic arm under control of his brain. I think that's a major, major breakthrough. Okay, there's some music. Time for me to get off the air here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. Have a really great, safe Memorial Day weekend. We'll be back on Monday here at RBN. Aloha, America.